Hello everyone, welcome to those who haven't been here before. Welcome back to those who have watched before. Thanks for coming again. My name is Leah Langley, and we are going to go over the books I read in April 2025. 3 books I read this month, 3 really great books. Before we get into those, just a reminder, follow me on Goodreads at Leah Langley. If you want to see the books I read, even before I do these videos, or if you want to see my highlights and notes on the books, I try to get a Kindle copy on every book I have if I don't have the physical. So I kind of track things in there. You can see my full reviews that I write out for every book, all that good stuff. It's over there on Goodreads. So let's jump in. So the first book I read for April 2025 is this great book called Black Girl Call Home by Jasmine Mans. Exceptional book. I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 on Goodreads. This was a book that we picked for, if you've been here before, you know I've spoken about this book club I'm a part of. This is the book we picked for April. April is Poetry Month. So we always read a poetry book for April, and this was an excellent choice. I'm not a huge poetry reader. Now and then I always read one in April. Like I've read 2 other poetry books this year. So I don't do it all the time, but poems are great, and this one was no exception. Black Girl Call Home is a love letter to the wandering black girl and a vital companion to any woman on a journey to find truth, belonging, and healing. Jasmine Mans exploring belonging, identity, and the black female experience in the United States, and she covers race, queerness, womanhood, self-love, and family. The poems don't feel like typical, they feel almost like conversations, a lot of them, or like letters, prayers. There's a couple poems, I don't remember how many, but she will set stage. There was a moment between a mother and a daughter, and it's setting the stage and doing little stage directions, and I think approaching poetry in that way, and some of them is it deepens the vulnerability and the strength of the piece. It was just a very good book. I want to tell you some of my favorite poems from this book. There are too many to go over. We had a very long book club discussion this past Sunday on it, and we didn't even get to scratch the surface on some of these poems because obviously there's only so much time in the day, but excellent piece. So some of my favorite ones are We Host These Variables, Birmingham, She Doesn't Look Like Rape, Speak to Me of My Mother, Who Was She? I actually want to read Speak to Me of My Mother, Who Was She? Because it's a little bit of a shorter one. Tell me about the girl my mother was before she traded in all her girl to be my mother. What did she smell like? How many friends did she have before she had no room? Before I took up so much space in her prayers, who did she pray for? I like that poem a lot because I think it's one of those things where you think about your mother or your father as well. Your parents before you were into their life, what were they like before? You think about, people say parents say when you have a child, it's your heart living outside your body. You're constantly thinking about them. You're constantly doing all these things, and trying to think about learning about your parents before you were there. I think it's important to know what you can about your parents, obviously before you and even after you. That's a whole different part of their life that you haven't gotten to experience, but it's good to check in on those things. I like that poem. There's another one, Birmingham, that I want to read. It's quite the emotional poem for me, and it's a little bit longer, but I want to read it. Why not just read it? It's an excellent poem. So it's called Birmingham. Here we go. Mama said the bomb wasn't for me. I think it was meant for Pastor Martin because he be having them dreams. Maybe those white men didn't know that little black girls, we'd be going to church too, and we'd be folding our hands, praying, and we'd be taking communion just like their daughters do. Maybe if I wore my church shoes, the bad men would have never came for me. I knew they matched my dress, but they always just hurt in my feet. I'd be thinking, did God christen the bombs that exploded my flesh into sacrifice? And do anybody be hearing those sacrificial scriptures spoken in tongues claiming Christ before everything went boom, before the smoke and rubble baptized these collapsing bones? Maybe if they knew we were the most beautiful flowers right before the wind and dirt began playing tug of war with with the delicates of our petals. Mama said it only took one man to die for the sins of this entire world, so how did that man let this church tremble on my soul? And I don't remember there being enough holy water to stop the smoke or to calm the burning. Mama said some heartbreaks just be too hard to swallow at communion. Some serpents just be finding salvation in baptismal pools. Some mice just be screaming America's dirty little secrets. Mama said some deaths just be too black and too white to be labeled holy. Some sacrifice comes without permission. Some sacrifice comes without fair warning. God can't always protect you from the boogeyman. So some baby girls will reach the pearly gates and won't be tall enough to turn the handle. Mama said some men just be too guilty to claim innocence for their own Christ. But what did I do? I never wanted to play with the white girls. I never asked for integration. I wanted roller skates, an extra piece of cake after dinner time. Sometimes I'd just be thinking maybe God was too busy trying to protect Martin to think about us. I never asked for that man's dream, but Mama be saying that his dream be asking for me. If you didn't know, that poem is in the point of view of one of the four little girls who died in a church bombing in Birmingham, Alabama. I believe in 1963 it was. There were 5 girls actually. One girl survived. Her older sister actually was one of the 4 who passed. And this poem to me was one that just like it just punches you when you think about in the perspective of a child. And they were very young, and I could go into it a lot more. And we talked about this poem when we spoke on Sunday in my book club, and that was just one of the hard hitting ones. There are a lot of other ones in there. It's an excellent book. I could sit here and read a bunch of the poems to you right now as we sit here, but then we'd be here all day. So I will not. I know it's kind of a heavy one to leave you on, but I really recommend you reading this book, Black Girl Call Home. It's so excellent. All right, second book for April 2025. Another hard-hitting one. Excellent book, but it made me want to pull my hair out. It's called Dying of Whiteness, How the Politics of Racial Resentment is Killing America's Heartland by Jonathan M. Metzl. I don't know exactly how this book came across like my desk or something. I don't like remember how this like came to me. But I'm glad it did. It was a good book, and I think, the title obviously grabs you, but reading of it from Metzl kind of was like you're putting together some of the things you either experienced or witnessed, or kind of just like this phenomenon that's kind of growing. Let me kind of explain what it's about before I talk about it a little bit more. So, in election after election, conservative white Americans have embraced politicians who pledge to make their lives great again. But as physician Jonathan M. Metzl shows in Dying of Whiteness, the policies that result actually place white Americans at ever great risk of sickness and death. Interviewing a range of everyday Americans, Metzl examines how racial resentment has fueled pro-gun laws in Missouri, resistance to the Affordable Care Act in Tennessee, and cuts to schools and social services in Kansas. He shows these policies increasing deaths by gun suicide, falling life expectancies, and rising dropout rates. That is kind of the encapsulating it a little bit, but I wanted to actually just read what I wrote on Goodreads, because there's a lot I could say about this book, but I want to say it. I want to basically say what I read, and there's some quotes in here and things like that I'm going to pull that kind of help explain where I was coming at from this book. So like I said, excellent book. I gave it a 4 out of 5, but it made me want to pull my hair out, and it really did. So Metzl, or I'm going to start calling him JMM. Metzl meticulously takes you through 3 separate states, each covering a different issue. Missouri and guns are first, Tennessee and healthcare are second, Kansas and schools are third. Quote here, the core argument from JMM, the core argument of the book is that politics that claim to make white America great again end up making America, particularly working class white lives, harder, sicker, and in many instances shorter. This was JMM speaking on Bill Maher's show years ago when the book came out. I think it came out in 2019, this book. Back to me now. He breaks down each core topic in this book so well, using extensive research from his time in these places and other studies. This phenomenon of dying of whiteness isn't news to anyone paying attention. JMM presents hard facts about what many of us have witnessed, read about, etc. As I've said, it makes you want to pull your hair out at times, because it's like, don't you see, you are getting the short end of the stick, and you are so committed to the destruction of others, you're missing that you are also in the path. It's been going on for a long while, but I feel it's more pervasive now, or more out in the open over the past 10 to 15 years with the leadership changes in the United States has experienced. JM shares Becca Campbell's story in the conclusion, and it's just another unbelievable story about dying of whiteness, and he wraps all the key points in the books together so well in Campbell's story. I won't summarize it here, but this is what JM shared following the telling. I won't share. I think you should read it, because me saying it's not really gonna Becca Campbell's story. I think it's something. If you read this book, or if you look up Becca Campbell, you can read it yourself. But I think the way JMM keeps saying, let me say Jonathan Metzl basically lays it out in the end, is like in the conclusion, tying everything together that we had been discussing over the pages. It was excellent. But this is what basically he said towards the end of the book, following the telling of Becca Campbell's story. I thought frequently of Becca Campbell over the course of writing this book. I did not know Campbell or interview her. What I learned about her came from media reports. Yet for me, Campbell's tragic story became emblematic of the larger narrative I tracked in this book, regarding the kinds of mortal trade-offs white Americans make in order to defend an imagined sense of whiteness. It's a narrative about how whiteness becomes a formation worth living and dying for, and for how, in a myriad of ways and on multiple levels, white Americans bet their lives on a particular set of meanings associated with whiteness, either in the face of clear threats to morality or to common sense. A central political script that emerges in ways that, in its worst moments, defines the boundaries of white America in relation to real or imagined others who want to take what is or has to be what is. The story of Becca Campbell, and indeed of dying whiteness, asks us to consider what white Americans give up when they invest so heavily in remaining at the top of the social hierarchy, or more often in defending a notion of status or privilege that appears under attack. In many instances, we give up days and months and years of life, as well as skills that might lead to better, more non-hierarchical, and less lethal solutions to the anxieties brought about by living in an ever more integrated world. This is one of those books where I could talk about it a lot, and I could talk about some of the points of it. I'm not an expert on it. Metzel is. He's the one who's been in the places interviewing these people. There's stories of even the beginning of the beginning of the book in what's the first state, Missouri, talking about healthcare. There's one man he interviewed, Trevor. I forget what disease he had, but he had some disease, and he is refusing basically Medicaid, or refusing the kind of social service because he was or against basically expanding, even though it would help him, because he's like, I don't want anybody else to get services who don't deserve it, or who are going to take advantage of the system, or whatever it is, and he's willing to die. And I'm not sure if he died in the book or not, because this was 2019. He might be dead now. I don't know. But even someone like that who was so hard, and his beliefs of no, I'm not going to allow it. Then when we moved to Tennessee, and we're looking at the gun deaths, people and their families dying by gun suicide, and accessibility to guns in the home, and at the end of the day, they're just they're focused on everything else but the gun, or they don't want to talk about it or acknowledge what happened to their child. Especially young white men are really high in gun suicides, and suicides in general. They're the leaders, and he did well with comparing different areas, and doing statistics to make sure things lined up in terms of how many white people there are versus other races and things like that. It's just, and then you think about in Kansas as well, with the schools and social services that people were against. It was really just it makes you want to rip your hair out, because it's these are things that could help you, but you're so pressed in your ways that you won't allow them to. So, really great book, a book I'd recommend to a lot of people. Dying of Whiteness, Jonathan M. Metzel. All right, book 3 for April 2025 is the book I've been wanting to read for a long time. It's such an important book to the African American canon, and I'm so happy I finally read it. It is The Souls of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois. Like I said, it's crucial to the African American canon. It's such a Du Bois is such a crucial figure to Black Americans, and I was happy to finally read it. This book was originally published. This book was originally published in 1903. Many people have read it. Obviously, it has great staying power. It's still getting printed, all types of things. And I'm happy I read it. I read this book very, very slowly. I went to check. I started reading this book in March. I started reading this book March 15th. And over that time, I started reading. I had to put it down. I had to read some other things. I thought maybe I'd finish it in March, but then I was no, I want to keep slowing down. I kind of even got to the end, but then I was I want to back up and go over things again, and even go over with a finer tooth comb, and just really soak in the information. And I just finished this book a couple days ago. So it's the longest taken me to read a book in a little bit. But I'm happy I sat with this for a while, because it's one that you really want to digest and take in. even though it was published in 1903, it's just as relevant and just as powerful today as it was then. This is a quote from someone who was writing W.B. Du Bois's autobiography on them. Few books make history, and few still become foundational texts for movements and struggles of an entire people. The souls of Black folk occupies this rare position. It helped to create an intellectual argument for Black freedom struggle in the 20th century. It's from Manning Marble. I saw another quote from someone saying, like, the civil rights bus boycotts had many roots, none of them as more important, or this was one of the important roots of like getting that movement going and other things like that. Like it was so important at that time, still so important today. Du Bois uses various means: history, sociology, literary expression, and personal narrative to detail and examine the condition of Black Americans today throughout these essays. There are several of them, all kind of covering different things, but one thing that many people know, if they have not read this book, they've heard of his double consciousness theory, which he introduces in this book in the beginning of the book, and it permeates throughout the book as the concept, as I said, as is the concept that you kind of live with every day. If you've never heard of double consciousness, basically what it is like the experience of African Americans who constantly view themselves through the eyes of a society that often denigrates them, creating a conflict between their own identity and how they're perceived by others. It's kind of like if you're African American or Black or a person of color, whatever, you would know of how the ceiling is. I think when you're walking in a space and you know who you are, you know things like that. But in certain spaces, you can kind of like you just kind of have to be checking like, okay, how do they view me, or what is me stepping into this room doing to them? Things like that. You kind of have to like you don't even always think about, but you're doing it, and it's just what it is. It's just what we deal with on a day-to-day, and he introduces that concept in this book, and that's something that I said many people, something like I knew about many years ago. I'm happy I was able to actually read the book, read his full thoughts on it, and everything else he added in the Souls of Black Folk. Let me read a little bit what he says about double consciousness. Obviously, he says more than just this little paragraph in some, but I want to just read from the text. After the Egyptian and Indian, the Greek and Roman, the Teuton and Mongolian, the Negro is a sort of seventh son, born with the veil and gifted with second sight in this American world, a world which yields him no true self-consciousness, but only lets him see himself through the revelation of the other world. It is a peculiar sensation, this double consciousness, the sense of always looking at oneself through the eyes of others, of measuring one's soul by the tape of the world that looks on in amused contempt and pity. One never feels this two-ness, an American and Negro, two souls, two thoughts, two unreconciled strivings, two warring ideals in one dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. Let me go on a little bit here. The history of the American Negro is the history of this strife, this longing to attain self-conscious manhood, to merge his double self into a better and truer self. So yeah, that's something he just, when he's speaking about the double consciousness theory and things like that, in that first essay that he offers, yeah, definitely a great book. Like I said, one I've had on my to read list for a while. Happy I finally did. Like I said, happy I finally took time to read it slowly, go through it, digest it. There's so much here, so many great offerings. Again, as relevant and powerful in 1903 as it was today, and so important to us, truly. All right, that is the books for April 2025, the 3 books. Quite the books, really great books, but heavy. A lot of them in some ways are like a lot of, just, no one was really falling in love. Not that you always have to read like nice little books, but I will say the book I'm reading currently right now, I'm reading an Emily Henry book, a nice little love, boy meets girl love story. Need some of that sometimes. So yeah, I'll talk about that next month. I probably will get through it soon because it's quite good. It just came out actually. It's the new one that just came out that I was able to get from the library. Anyway, let's wrap up April here. Thanks so much for watching. Like I said before, follow me on Goodreads so you can keep up with me there. Comment if you read any of these books. If you have any book recommendations for me, hit me with them. I'm always looking for some. Yeah, again, thanks so much. I will see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.